Hello, everyone, and welcome back to a wonderful new episode of the StudioMEcast. And today we have an excellent guest with us. He's an actor, but he's a director, and we're going to be talking a little bit about the craft. To give you an idea of what he's done a bit of, he's done a lot of Shakespeare acting. We might get into that a little bit. He's also just had the world premiere of his short film Pivot Pals at Dances with Films in New York City. So, thanks a lot for joining me today.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So, Doron Feldman, you started, is it fair to say you started as an actor? Is that where you'd put the beginning of your, I guess, artistic journey?
100%.
Wonderful. And there's been a bunch of actors who go from acting to directing, right? And there's another podcast you were on, which we can link in the description if you want to hear more about like his beginning journey to going from acting to directing, but I want to see if we can cover some more new stuff so that your fans aren't just hearing the same thing over and over again, right? So you went from acting to directing, and when you started to do that, you worked very closely with a cinematographer so that you could really focus with the actors and the script, I'm guessing. So when you, in your filmmaking career, as it's been, what has been the most difficult thing for you to learn as like just a new thing out of the left?
I think the visual vocabulary of film was, working on understanding camera angles and lenses and how those things make you feel and how they interact with the story and being able to choose, though I rely heavily on a cinematographer because that is certainly part of their craft, and it's a conversation and a dialogue. I would say that was the largest gap to fill in my training, because as an actor, you understand story intrinsically, you understand the process of working with an actor, of blocking a scene, and there's always, we all grew up on film and TV, so we understand how things look, but when you really get down into the nitty-gritty, it's very involved, and the choices that you make or don't make dictate so much of how an audience feels. So I would probably put it to that.
Do you have a favorite movie?
I do, but it's not for it's totally emotional, which is the movie Hook. As a kid.
What?
Hook? Is that your favorite movie?
Yeah.
Really?
Yeah, it is.
Amazing. I don't think that's pretty funny. I don't think it...
What?
Yeah,
no
crazy.
one else has ever said that.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh, man.
I don't think it's one of the best reviewed films, but it just has such a heart to it, and it's so fun. And when people ask me, and I say, well, no, it's not the greatest film of all time. I'm not going to say that, but to me, it's the greatest film of all time.
Did you, look me up?
No, I swear. I swear. Maybe we're from the same generation.
I don't know, man, because I say the exact same thing. I'll be like, hey, I don't think it's the greatest movie ever made, but it's my favorite. So that's just you and I met because Keith, who is one of the co-owners of StudioME, co-founders, he introduced you came into the studio and he just said, hey, this guy came in and I think you're basically both the same person. You should meet. And I'm like, oh yeah, sure. But that's pretty weird.
That is pretty weird.
Because it might seem like, to our viewing audience here, it might seem a little bit like, oh, well, you both like the same movie, but it's like the way you're talking about it is like, this is odd to me. Okay, cool. So
maybe you have to put that caveat, because you expect people to say
yeah, that's weird, man.
I will say I have a close. Little Miss Sunshine also is a film that really, and I'm not sure if it's just because of when I saw it and how I saw it, but it influenced one of the primary screenplays I've worked on in the last 4 or 5 years, and I keep coming back to that. There's something also at the heart of that film that inspires me quite a bit. So I think I don't know, those two pieces, there's so many great films. It's so hard to answer, but I
Right.
think that's also what makes Hook a little bit safe, right? Because it's so unexpected, right? And also, you're not competing with the masters. You're not competing with Fellini with Hook. Like, Hook is not competing against Fellini. Okay, we're not
No,
we're not
yeah.
putting Hook and 8.5 together.
No.
Okay, so it's like, you know, and you can sit here all day and talk about your favorite from the '60s, or like go back to, you know, oh, we're gonna French New Wave. You know, you can get really film school about it. You can just say, I love the movie Hook, and it really deeply impacted me, and it just makes me feel great, right? Like,
oh my gosh, dude. Oh, okay. Yeah, so we're on the same page. This is a
Right.
great start.
Great.
Okay. All right.
I guess Keith was right.
Yeah, seriously, that's weird. Like, I'm still skeptical that you didn't look me up or something, but I'll take your word at it. This is crazy. So, all right, cool. So we both love Hook, and for like a lot of the same reasons too, and describe it the same way. Fantastic. Well, then let's kind of take that to your film that you're developing, right? You say it's in development, or like you have a script already for your feature.
My feature, yeah.
All right, and so, but that's a historical film. But you've also described it as like there's at least a comedic side to it as well, right?
So it's not historical. It's totally fiction.
Okay.
But it's set in the Gilded Age, which is
Right.
late 1800s. So it is a period piece. It's a comedy.
I see.
The script is made. We are very close to attaching 3 key talent to it. Unfortunately, the contracts, the LOIs are not signed yet, so I can't say who they are.
That's okay. Yeah,
But
yeah.
you'll recognize a few of them from some streaming networks.
You're getting some talent in on this. That's gotta be exciting.
Yeah, we're getting some talent, and we're basically in the development process, right? We're putting the project together, start to finish. Before I came here, I was just interviewing a wardrobe and costume designer
Nice.
out of New York, who's a really talented person, and yeah, that's what, you know. The script has been written. We have a draft that we're really excited about. People have responded incredibly well to it. I'm very thankful about that. Given that I've also had a number of scripts that haven't been responded to in quite the same way. So it's nice when one sort of works. But of course, we're in rewrites. You know, I have a whole laundry list of rewrites to put forth, and you're always rewriting until you shoot.
Yeah, and then you might even rewrite it while you're editing it too, as well. You know, it's like it changes through it. I think that's something that I've noticed is very different between theater versus film. Is that in film the script is typically fluid in a lot of ways, but in the theater, it's like, no, the book is like scripture. Like, you don't mess with it too much anyway. So
Yeah, I mean, you're not allowed to.
Yeah.
In terms of, you can't touch a playwright's words, right? If someone has come from the playwright's team to your production and they saw that 4 lines were left out, you know, maybe not a dropped line, but that it seems you've really changed them.
you can't like rewrite their thing.
I mean, there are stories of, and I can't recall what playwright I'm thinking about right now. There's stories of people, you know, going, and I'm not sure why they don't have better things to do with their time, but they go to a regional house, and if the isn't in the right place, or the isn't in the right place, so
man.
that's, you know, they take them to court. It's that big of a deal. So yeah, I say the playwright in theater runs the show, and in film, the director tends to run the show creatively.
And that's also something to say about working with professional actors. Like, you know, I think most filmmakers probably start with, you know, getting their friend or siblings or whatever to act in things. But, you know, eventually you get to a point where, as you say, you're like, and not that this is the first time you've worked with professional actors. It isn't. You are professional. But it's like you're pointing out you might have a bit of star power going on with your thing. I don't want to pry too much into that, but is there, as a director, are you intimidated at all at the possibility of working with this talent?
Yeah, for sure. You know, I have a lot of friends who have done very well professionally, and they're doing well. So it's one thing to work with your friends, even if they've been on shows or they're on Broadway, and it's like, well, I know you. I've known you for a decade.
Right.
So,
you know what jokes are okay or whatever. You've worked together. You got that language.
Exactly. And it's another thing to work with somebody new who has a reputation, who is surrounded by a team of people. And you want to make sure the relationship goes well. I mean, it's one of the most vital relationships. So I definitely have some apprehension, but also I'm not just finding, it's like, oh, this person has X amount of followers, therefore they're in the movie. That's not, you know, what I'm doing. I'm looking at the person, I'm looking at their work, and I'm also finding out about them. Like, what's their process? are they collaborative? I'm interviewing them before I just hand them the role. Sweetly, one of them said, I'd audition for you. And I said, you do not have to audition for me. Like, you're an incredibly talented person. You don't have to audition. But I also was recommended this person by a friend, so I could trust that I'm going to already have some kind of shared, wavelength with that person.
Recommendations are definitely worth so much more than a lot of other things we have control over. I think, I want to start push a little bit more into this actor-director thing. When you're directing other actors, does the actor in you come out at all where, like, maybe, is there any type of balance you have to weigh between you're directing them versus they're the actor who still gets to, like, interpret the role versus maybe how you would want to play it? Does that ever come up into when you're working?
I think it's actor dependent. I had directors that would almost move through the blocking and almost act it out for you in a sense. Never a line reading, but would present it to you or express it to you. And I'm a very physical actor. I'm sort of classically stuck in my head, but I found in my acting training over about 5 years that really, in order for me to access my best work, I had to start from a physical place and not a mental place. So,
okay.
For instance, when I direct theater, and also when I've done film, I don't like to start around a table. I think for me that is a trap. It's a trap inside my head.
So you don't like to do a table read?
I do like to do a table read. I like it to be physical and on its feet and already moving through space first, and then we can sit down and have an intellectual conversation. But it's selfish because not everybody works that way. It's just for me, I discovered about myself as an actor, and I like to bring that into process, is if I start in an intellectual spot, I'm analyzing the script, it's very hard for me to get out of my head. And when you're working as an actor, it comes from a gut place. It is coming from a deep core place if you're truly tapped in. It is in the moment not an intellectual pursuit. Of course, you're using your intellect, but there's some kind of like feeling to it that drives you more than a thought. And if you're thinking while you're acting, then you're not acting, right? So
I've heard that yeah.
And that's hard. And I'm not saying, when, as you said, I've done some Shakespeare, and I toured 3 productions for a year of my life. Okay, so I would go from 8:30 a.m. matinees for children to shows in 2,000 seat audiences in Burlington, Vermont. And you do so many of them, and even then, even after 100 versions of a show, sometimes you still find yourself thinking your way through it. And so you also sort of learn to, like, over time, let that go. Like, okay, so I was a little more in my head today. Okay, tomorrow I'll be hopefully less in my head. But in general, I like to approach it from a physical place. So when I work with actors, I never give line readings. I'll never, ever give a line reading unless it's a minor. I just worked in Pivot Pals with an 8-year-old, and he did great. I very rarely had to do it, but occasionally you have to say, hey, can you hit this operative word for me? Like, it's going to really make it clear for me to understand it. Or, hey, can you say it like this, which is not something you want to do with a professional actor. I do not recommend it. Unless they ask for it, I suppose. I think that's bad direction and not a helpful process, but sometimes with a minor you have to do it. Mm-hmm. Even so, it depends on the actor. When I'm working with somebody, like my very close collaborator, Ty Fanning. Ty is one of the most masterful actors I've ever met in my life and had the chance to work with. We went to school together. We created companies together. We have a shorthand.
He's in Pivot Pals?
He's in Pivot Pals,
That's
correct.
Right, yeah.
I do not have to go. I can mostly just sit back, and I might just have to go up to him and say like 1 or 2 words. And he goes, oh, yeah. I'll say, hey, how about this way? He goes, oh, yeah, you're right. That's another way to think about this. It's like very, very simple, mm-hmm. right? So I think it depends on the actor.
Absolutely. I think it's almost like there is that level of professionalism, like you talk about. Like, don't avoid doing line readings with professional actors. It's not typically gonna, unless you're trying to make them angry. It's don't do. But there's that professional level of working with it. But I also I want to clarify to something you said during that, which was you did 3 when you were in that Shakespeare company. You were doing 3 plays at once. And when you got to where you were going, they told you which of the 3 plays they wanted. So you and the rest of the cast had to have 3 plays like ready to go. which is like, it's hard enough to have one show that you're doing, let alone I'm not sure which one we're doing later. And then, so that's just, to give the people an idea of like, your commitment to the arts and just like how you do things. I just think that's a really cool.
Technically, it was actually 5 different productions.
There we go.
So, but 2 of those productions were condensed versions for when we went to schools and did productions for schools. So we would have like the 2-hour version, and then I don't know. I think one of the shows like when we did the Odyssey. Which I shout out for you.
Shout
on your
out
YouTube
Homer.
channel.
There we go. I will be doing Odyssey at some point, but yeah, working on it.
Yeah. So when we did that, we had a 2.5-hour version. Maybe it was in close to 3 hours at some point, and then we had a 90-minute version. And so you had to sort of and there were cases where we also did a Macbeth that I think that was like a 2-hour production, and then maybe we boiled that one down to an hour and a half or 90 minutes.
Did you prefer the longer or shorter versions?
After a year on the road doing the shows, what do you think we preferred?
Okay, fair enough. All right,
we preferred,
cool.
Listen, you're doing it over and over and over,
yeah.
And it also depended. It also, it was also dependent on where we were, and if it's a 3,000 seat theater, then like maybe you want to like sit in that a little bit longer because it feels really nice. Yeah. If you're performing in a cafeteria for a bunch of school children at 8:30 in the morning. You want you want the short show so that you can get out and get some breakfast, right?
Okay.
You're like I don't want to like. I'd love for you to have the 3-hour Odyssey, but I really don't want to be here at 8:30 in the morning. So like,
of course, yeah. I understand. But, all right. Well, you were jumping back forward again. Then we were saying about you don't like to start a table read with like everybody sitting around the table. You like to be at the very least standing, maybe walking through it. Like, I mean, I'm imagining people are still holding the script or like a iPad or something, and are you like already starting to act it out with people? Or are you just sort of meandering around? Maybe one person goes over and sits down. Like, what does that look like? How's that been when you've done it? I'm fascinated by this because I think it's like immediately it's like, oh, I haven't thought of doing a table read like this, but it makes so much sense immediately to me. So what does that look like when you've done it?
Well, I will say a little caveat. I have not been able to do it for film yet.
Okay.
I just think there's something about getting everyone together. It's like you're just running and doing the film, right? So unfortunately, a lot of that work is sort of just on the fly. But in a sense, when it's when you're doing these smaller projects, you don't have time for rehearsals, right? Like, excuse me, I don't have time for a rehearsal, the week before for like 10 hours. Like we're rehearsing on the day. So actually, when you're rehearsing in the scene where you're shooting the thing, like it is physical in a sense, right? You're not sitting around a table thinking about it. You're just doing it. I think Michael Caine says that theater is performed and films are made, right? You're making something. So when I've done it with theater, I've done a few things. There's a company called Complicité. I took one of they're from the UK. I took one of their techniques, which was very simple actually. You put a line on the floor, and everyone sits down. And whenever someone is in the scene, they stand behind the line. And when they are reading, like they step in front of the line. And what that does is allows you as an ensemble to like get a sense of who's in what and how many. It just gives you a sense of like architecture and space as well. Like how many bodies are in this space in this scene actually. Right? If I have 20 people standing behind the line, but then 3 are moving forward, I start to think as a director, great, I'm gonna maybe focus. How I'm gonna place them, and you sort of start to. Something comes out of it that it's sort of mysterious, I guess, but something comes out that and then that's just a way. It's also just like a way for you to, again, not just be around a table, right? Just the simple act of the actor steps forward when they're speaking and they're involved in the scene and they're stepping over the line is a physical gesture. It's a step, and it automatically gets them out of their head, right? Because they're at least taking a step. They're not sitting at a table like leaning over, really putting their head into it. They're engaged in just one step. So I've done that. I'll have them wander around the space. So you know what? We're going to take our scripts in our hands for the first read, and we're just going to wander the space. We're not gonna, if you feel like sitting, you can sit for a little while, but you can do whatever you want in the space. You just can't sit for too long, right? Maybe if I'm thinking about if I was doing a better version of it, I would say, I'd give a rule. You can sit for like a minute, but then after that minute, you better get back up again and be doing something else, right? Because maybe there's a moment or a scene that feels like it wants to sit for a second, and so we'll allow them to go sit. He'll go, if it was this space, I'd go sit over there by the wall. But if they sit for an hour, then okay, what's the point? But also, what can be interesting about movement is, let's say let's say the scene is a podcast, okay, and they're going to be sitting. Well, what happens if they aren't? What does it do to the actor if he's walking around the space or running while he's saying the lines in the scene that's in a podcast? It might mean that when he actually gets to sitting, he's carrying all that emotional energy, all of that work, all that physical work inside of him, and it's or her, or them, and it's buzzing inside, and it comes out in the scene without them moving a muscle, right? So I think I'm sort of going into the weeds here a little bit.
No, this is like my favorite thing to talk about.
Cool. I don't want to go too far down the rabbit hole,
no,
but
please,
that's
like, this is why I wanted to talk to you today.
Cool.
This
I would
is my
love
favorite thing
to do this for film, and in fact,
Yeah.
I'm very much hoping that I can rehearse this upcoming film, and rehearse it like a play for 2 weeks.
Oh, that would be so cool.
And then just go film it. My hope is that
Wow.
somehow with budget, actually, it's advantageous. Like, if so much of the blocking is laid out, that's less time on set, less time with cameras.
That's a good point.
To have a DP, let's say, assuming you have the DP in the room, and they're with you and Scripty and maybe a first AD, and they're in the room watching, and you're working with the talent. Okay, and even better if you were actually in the actual space. And now you have a DP walking around as you're blocking, looking at, like, it's a second eye, right? They're looking for you and saying, well, what if we shot this thing over here? Like, you're standing over here, Doron, so you're not seeing this thing over here. But actually, and then, oh, that's interesting. What if I reblocked it? Like, this is a fantasy of mine to be able to work this way, but it's a process I'm curious about.
Absolutely. When you're working, when you're actually filming, all right, you're on set, DP's there, you're doing the scene, and you're directing. Where are you? Are you in Video Village? Are you like over the DP's shoulder looking at the viewfinder? Are you like there with the actors? Like, where ideally, because I mean, different sets, different scenes, like sometimes you have to be in the next room or in the car or whatever, but ideally, where are you on set while a take is being shot?
I'm in the room with a monitor, and my eyes are glued to the monitor. Because at the end of the day, the only thing that matters is what's in that monitor. And so I like handheld, so I can walk around with it and move around and hold it, watch the scene. My wife calls it my Game Boy. Hold the scene, put it down, easily walk over. But I like to give them the space, right? So I'll step out. Now it's their space, and so they'll do it. And then I'll step into the space if I need to make an adjustment.
That can make a big difference. Like, there was one time I was doing a scene, and it was like sort of like the emotional climax of this short, right? And the performance wasn't bad it's sort of like a mini monologue, but it wasn't quite where it needed to be. And then me and I was co-directing it with a friend of mine, and then at one point, so long ago, I forget who said it, but one of us was just like, hey, why don't we just kind of hit record and leave the room and let them do their thing? And we could kind of listen to them. So we're like just sitting in the hall when we're like, all right, action, and she does it, and we could hear the difference immediately, which is like, I imagine is just
so who was still in the room with them?
Just them. There's no crew in there or anything. We just set the lights and the audio and the camera. We hit record and we
lapels
left.
on them, mics or something?
No, we just set up
Boom,
had it there, on a stand, and that was the take that ended up in the film, and
that is very cool.
It was so awesome. I was like, it was one of those things where you get to. One of the things I love about making movies is, even though I love watching films when they're done, there is something exhilarating about the live experience of the live performance and the machine moving while you're doing it, So it's, but yeah, what you're saying of like giving the actors their space is like that's an interesting observation when you have that Game Boy, you have that freedom to do that, and it's like, yeah, it really can make a difference in how they perform, which I think just goes to show it can be really difficult for actors when it's like they have to do any type of scene and there's like 15 people around them or more, all with, just running everything around them and they have to get in the zone. But anytime you can give an actor that freedom and do that can be really powerful. So I think that's awesome that you're aware of that.
Did that end up being your favorite scene in the short?
Yeah, pretty much. It was, there's a line in particular. That was like the first short that I really felt was kind of like my first film that I really did. Like I made a bunch of videos and stuff like that, and we didn't shoot it on film or anything like that, but that was the first time where I felt like I actually made something that I could say like, oh, this was beyond home video kind of a deal, where it's like, oh, this is a real short film.
It's
and
a movie.
It was the first thing that I guess I don't know how to even encapsulate, because I wouldn't say it's like, oh, it's the first thing I was like proud of exactly. But that was, for me and a lot of the people who worked on that is, we say, like, that was our first one, kind of. And that scene, that sort of moment, that beat, where it's that monologue, then it's a character who's on a phone, cuts back to the other character, and then it cuts back to them, and they have the line that, kind of sums up the whole film. It's like, that's where everything leads up to, and I'm really happy with, I'm just so thankful for the performances that are in that film. And I'm really glad that, like, for me, I'll ask you this back, but one of the ways that I kind of judge for myself whether I was, I guess, successful with my job at directing, this isn't the only thing, and you gotta be, at least try to be satisfied with your own work, even though some people are never satisfied, whatever. But one of the things that kind of lets me know that I did at least something right with my job is, and I take like enormous pride in, is when my actors get awards at festivals. When the actor, actress is like, whenever they get best actor or best actress or something, that's where I'm just like, yeah, like that almost matters to me more means more to me than even like a best director award a lot of the time would, just, I don't know, because that's where so much of my focus is. They're the one who does the work. They're the actor. They're the one on screen. And if the film is terrible, they're the one who's really putting themselves out there. Your name's on it, but their face is on it. But yeah, whenever the actors get recognized, that's just something that I'm like, yeah, that's my guy, or whatever. So, but yeah, I'm very happy with that scene.
I think maybe you feel this way, but when you're working as a director, you're like, there's something in you that you give over to the actor, something of yourself in the directing of them. So I think I think if you're working well with an actor, you're giving them everything you have. You're their biggest cheerleader, and you need to be, and you need from them, you need a great performance from them. Mm-hmm. So you need a great performance from them, and they need you to watch them and be the eyes outside of them, and to give them feedback and something to bounce off of, so they can do their best work. Mm-hmm. And so I think what you're saying is when they receive an award for best actor, best actress, that's also your award, because at the end of the day, I can't remember which Stanislavski book. Stanislavski was the created he didn't call it the method. He created a school of acting that eventually was taken by the group theater and turned into what we know as method acting in America. And he was at the Moscow Art Theater. I believe in one of his books, might be Building a Character, he talks about an actor who he loved, who he worked with, and he says he's a brilliant actor. I can't remember who it was. And he went and he saw him in a show at some other regional house, and he said it was terrible. He was terrible. So how is it that this really terrific actor, it's called a master actor, could be wonderful in one show and terrible in another? Well, it might be writing, but it also might be direction.
Yeah, I mean, honestly, it's you hit the nail on the head there. There's so many actors I know who have I know them, I go to their show or I see their film or something, and you can really tell, like, it really can make such a huge difference with the direction of it. It's like they have the talent and the skill set, but it's like, even if you're the lead actor, you're not working alone. And if this actor thinks they're in one film and that actor thinks they're in a totally different film, or nothing's working, no one, like, the director isn't doing their job, it's like it can show the whole thing. It's kind of, I imagine it can be pretty terrifying for actors who are aware of that, and it's so you really have to support the actors and make sure that they have what they need, even if that's like, hey, they're about to do a pretty intense scene and we kind of need to, like, not have the entire crew being laughing and joking and establishing a different atmosphere while they're getting into their head, like whether you kind of run your set a certain way or you, like, make sure in advance they're going to have a place to kind of get in the zone, or something. But yeah, it is so weird how one actor and with two different directors you can't even believe it sometimes, it's odd. So yeah.
Yeah, there's a lot of ways. So maybe that's what you're saying in terms of, like, the pride you see in their award, because it's also your award.
Yeah, I mean, I mean, I still, like, always say, like, they're the one who's actually doing it. Mm-hmm. But if they aren't doing a good job, that's my fault a lot of the time. It's like, if they're committed but the performance isn't working out, it's like, it's somewhere at the end of the day, it's the director's fault.
It might be the script too.
Yeah, but then why did the director take the script?
Right. At the end of the day, it all falls back on the director.
Yeah. So it's that's why I think a lot of the time the director's name is either the last one in the opening credits and or the first name at the end credits. Not always, but sometimes. And I think that's because it's like, if this is bad, blame that person. It's like they're the one who did it. Yeah. Unless they didn't have control of their project, in which case, they get to say Alan Smithy directed it or something.
Yeah,
but
right.
Yeah, it's like, no, you got to own it. So when we're, do you ever do method acting yourself, by the way?
No, I'm not a method actor.
Yeah, it's probably good for sanity, I imagine.
Yeah, I don't think I'm in the camp of, everyone has their own process. I think if I had to pick a technique out of all the techniques, if I say, this one, if you forced me to pick one way of thinking about acting, it would be Michael Chekhov's technique, which is really based in physicality, imagination through physicality, and also there's this Lecoq school as well, was very interesting to me. But no, I'm not a method actor. I happen to actually think that, to me, the ability to separate yourself from the role and still create a compelling performance is what is called the craft of acting.
Right.
In a way, I wonder about method acting, and this might be controversial, but I wonder if are we just changing our psychology? Like, if you lock yourself in the room for long enough, are you just manipulating your brain and your psychology to be a certain way or behave a certain way? Mm-hmm. It's very powerful. It's an amazing thing that you're able to do it. But we're very, we can, who knows what we can convince ourselves of. And I think, and if it takes you to a place that you're not able to pull yourself, I think about Cate Blanchett a lot, because I think she is by far and away the master. I think she is the master. When she comes off stage after doing a riveting performance, let's say she's in Sydney, people say she just walks off like nothing's happened. Like, that's masterful, right? You just poured your heart out, and then you have this ability to separate yourself from the work, because it is a technique. It's a craft. It's a training. I'm very inspired by that personally.
Yeah, I think some method actors, like, what they're doing is, I don't want to say it's not acting exactly, but a lot of them describe as, no, I'm just changing who I actually am.
Yeah.
And so it's not so much as like staying in character. It's like, no, I've just turned into that person within reason, because even if someone's like method acting into being a murderer, they don't go out and kill people as part of their process. I hope. Jeez, that would be a fun. There's probably been a film about that. Anyway, there's.
Maybe it's your next one. Your next one after the feature.
The actor who's like, I got to get into character and just starts killing people.
Yeah,
that'd be fun. In a movie, lawyers. Anyway, so we got. All right. Well, we're sadly running up on time because I feel like I've just started to get to know so much more about you, and we like kind of dipped into a bunch of different topics here, and I just want to keep talking with you about all of them, because it's like, and then also just hitting it off with Hook's your favorite movie for like a lot of the same, and you describe that the same way, is just kind of awesome.
Just ask, like, how do you normally describe it? If I asked you, okay, let me ask you, what's your favorite movie?
Hook. I don't want to tell you why.
Oh, you say I don't want to tell you why?
Yeah, it's like I don't like talking about it. No, it's like, well, I mean, I'll explain a couple things. I know nothing about that movie. I have never and will never watch any behind the scenes on it. I know who Robin Williams is and Dustin Hoffman, Julia Roberts, right? Okay, like I'm not an idiot, but I know Steven Spielberg directed. I don't know what the runtime of that movie is. I don't check before I put it on. I have a VHS copy of it. That is the only way I've watched it my entire life. It's practically worn out. I try to watch it at least once a year. And for me, like when I watch that movie, I don't see filmmaking when I watch it. I'm just so in it, like, because I loved that movie before I even knew what editing was, you know, like how that even worked. So yeah, there's a lot of it's wrapped up in that kind of thing. I don't really go into, like, someone once sent me like, oh, here's a behind the scenes photo of, I didn't even look at it. I'm like, I don't wanna, because sometimes people get into filmmaking and it's like magic. It's like being a magician, where sometimes what wows you is the magic trick, and then sometimes you learn how the magic trick is done, and there's usually two ways to respond to that. One is, oh, well, that was obvious and easy and whatever. Anyone could do that. And the other way is, I want to be a magician, you know. And, I guess those are the two extreme reactions. But, I love filmmaking. I love every second of filmmaking the same way, I guess, that Winston Churchill loved every second of World War II. Like, sometimes it sucks, right? But it's also like, this is what I want to do, like this meaning.
This is meaningful. It's important.
Yeah. And so it's like, because, it's not always fun, but I also, anytime I'm working on a film, I just feel like the luckiest person ever. And, but with Hook, what I also have is sometimes people, I don't know if you've ever gotten this, people have said to me before, like, oh, well, you make films, so you probably just are always critical when you watch a movie, you don't like get into it like I do. I'm like, yeah, no. It's like some people are like that. That can be true. Sometimes magicians can only try to figure out how they did the magic trick.
Somewhat like that.
Right. Well,
but that's the mark of a great film, by the way, is if you're able to, if I'm able to be pulled out of that critical mindset.
Sometimes I little argument here.
Okay.
Okay, just a little, not exactly an argument, but I think as an audience member, I have a job too. It's not just for the actors and the writers and the cinematographers and the directors to do their best and impress me. Like they need to do a good job, right? Typically. But as an audience member, I have a role to play as well, which is I need to buy in to the film. Every movie is not scary. If you have the lights on, talk during, and you're like texting and like distracted or whatever, it's like, yeah, of course, you're going to go through a scary movie that you paid for, by the way, and just not engage with it, and then at the end try to impress someone in the movie theater who's never going to see you again by saying, like, I wasn't scared by that. It's like, yeah, no kidding. It's fake. It's a movie, but like if you buy into it, it's like if you don't buy into it, if you don't like try to get into it, or let yourself be taken away, then you're kind of doing yourself a disservice. You're robbing yourself of the medicine that art provides. And like for me, I love getting swept away in a film. I can, depending on the thing, I might watch it again with a more technical mindset. I might watch it with a technical mindset the first time, but I want to maintain the ability to just be the kid who's watching Hook, you know? And for me, that's one way that I kind of like, I keep Hook as a reference point for me in a way to maintain that sort of wide-eyed wonder that I have for cinema. And
because you know you'll turn it on, you'll just have a good time.
Yeah, and it's it's like going into a dream. It's like weird. Like I kind of almost can't remember watching the movie. It's odd. But yeah, I mean, but there's more. I could talk about Hook forever, but I won't because we're wrapping up here. Yeah, do a whole podcast about the movie I know nothing about, but what it means to me. But this has been great. Thank you so much. I would love to have you on again. And there's but once again, everybody, if you want to learn more about Doron and what he's got going on, there's going to be links in the description. And also, if you want to learn a bit more about like just some of the other podcasts he's been on, they might be able to find them down there as well. So have a good rest of your day, everybody. And thanks again for being on the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me.
Cheers.
Hey, I hope you enjoyed that episode. If you want to start your own podcast, why wait? Reach out to us at StudioME.me, and I hope you hear me again soon.